Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you have ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. I am your host, Patty Porter. My guest hosts, Dina Zameta and Stephen Kotev, along with our guest experts, will share our experiences, raise your awareness, and give you food for thought. We will share with you problem-solving strategies no matter what your situation is. At work, with neighbors or friends, family, and as partners. Tune in or join in the conversation every Tuesday evening. Well, welcome, listeners. It was the best of times, the worst of times. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. Quoted from Charles Dickens' *A Tale of Two Cities*. The holidays are upon us, and we are often reminded of our best memories and our worst family reunion nightmares. The holiday season alone puts a lot of stress due to high expectations of meeting long-held family traditions and conjures up past resentments and unresolved conflict with family members. So when you add into the holiday mix an aging parent with caregiving needs or a seriously or even terminally ill spouse, a sibling or parent, then the stressors intensify. So in tonight's episode, Family Holidays, Celebration or Mayhem, How to Cope with Illness, Aging, and Unresolved Issues addresses how do you get ahead of the curve now? How do you plan and prepare to reduce the stress, release anxiety, and manage expectations? So our guest tonight comes from Connecticut. He is Dr. Joe Nowinski. That's Nowinski. And he is taking your live calls tonight. We also have the chat room open as well. Joe is a clinical psychologist who has held positions as assistant professor of psychiatry at the University of California, San Francisco, and associate professor of psychology at the University of Connecticut. He is the co-author with Dr. Barbara Okun, and I've probably mispronounced that, listener, so it's O-K-U-N, of Saying Goodbye, A Guide to Coping with a Loved One's Terminal Illness. And Dr. Joe Nowinski currently blogs for Psychology Today. So if you're in the chat room now, and some of you are, thank you for joining us there, or on our Twitter feed, we're using the hashtag ConflictChat. If you are already on the phone, great. We'll take your calls today live. But if you're listening via your computer, you can call 347-324-3591 to talk with us. We do have, our chat room open at Texas Conflict Coach there at blogtalkradio.com, and we invite you to use, again, the Twitter feed. Now, Dr. Joe Nowinski also has a Twitter handle, which is just like it sounds, Dr. Joe Nowinski, with the hashtag there. So welcome, Joe. Thank you for coming to our program and educating our listening audience.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a very important topic.
It is, and I'm glad we're doing it early. Oftentimes we do this, way toward the end of November, December, but it's like, let's get a head start now, and that's something that you really promote is don't wait till the last minute. Let's think about what these early conversations need to be now, as we begin to head into the holidays. You have a lot of experience with this area, and we've had a chance to talk ahead of time. So I'd like to start our exploration and discovery from some of the family interviews that you used and referenced in your latest book, Saying Goodbye, especially as it relates to the holiday season. And by the way, can you clarify, because I'm sure I did not say Barbara's last name correctly, what is the pronunciation of her last name?
That's fine. It's Barbara Okun, O-K-U-N, Barbara Okun.
Okun, okay, Okun.
Okun, yeah. And she and I were very fortunate in that we had the opportunity to interview a large number of families and patients also of people who were in treatment for terminal or potentially terminal illnesses. And that's where the basis for the book, Saying Goodbye, came from. However, what we learned, interestingly enough, is that it not only applies to dealing with families who are facing terminal illness in a loved one, which, by the way, all of us will at some point in our lives. We'll either be the patient or it will be one of our loved ones. But it also applies to people who are aging, parents who are, say, 80 or 90 years old and who are becoming more infirmed, people who have just kind of chronic illnesses that are affecting their ability to function. And every family has to deal with that. And so we learned a great deal from interviewing families about how that affected them and how to cope with it. And it's especially relevant, as you point out, around the holidays, because as you said in your opening statement, that we have a lot of high positive expectations for the holidays. People want to feel good, and people sometimes have many good memories. But also, there's the other side of the coin, and I think it is important to sort of start thinking about it ahead of time now instead of waiting for the last minute, because when people wait for the last minute, there's usually nothing they can do to make themselves feel better, and the stress just sort of gets to them at some point. So now is a good time to think about your family, the upcoming holidays, the good, obviously, the good things about it that you remember, but also the bad things and what you can do about the bad.
Well, I think people rationally know that these are the things we should be talking about early on and planning ahead, but we don't. And I'm wondering from your discoveries with the interviews, what was the hardest thing? Why were they putting these things off? Why were they resistant?
Probably because they didn't feel okay about how they felt. Let me explain that. The holidays as they come up, obviously for every family are, very important times in the life of a family. And often people have very fond memories, okay, and high expectations about the holidays. But it's not uncommon for people to also have negative feelings. And typically what they take the form of resentments. I resent, something about my family or my growing up. And but what people often tend to do that complicates it is just avoid it. They want to avoid those feelings. And so the first thing that Barbara and I learned from these interviews is the value of accepting those feelings instead of trying to deny them, run away from them, to accept the fact that maybe it makes you very anxious. Maybe it makes you depressed. Maybe it brings up a lot of resentments. People often feel, oh, I shouldn't feel that way. I really need to bury those resentments. And so what happens is they try to avoid those feelings, and they end up going through the holidays and really, kind of toughing it out, not having a really good time, feeling very stressed. So the first thing is to accept the fact that if your family has changed because suddenly somebody who's very central in the family, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a spouse, is very ill, maybe terminally ill, or just dealing with a very serious illness, that the family dynamics have changed. Also accepting the fact that maybe you're carrying around some resentments from the past, They could vary from the fact that maybe you felt that you had too much responsibility growing up, and everybody else sort of like was kind of skating, if you will. Maybe you have feelings about the fact that maybe you were the black sheep of the family, and you've never really dealt with it. So the first step is basically to accept the fact that you may have mixed feelings about the holidays, not just positive feelings, but mixed feelings. And instead of denying it, to kind of accept that.
Okay, that's a great first strategy around some of what might be going on because, a lot of times people assume that the holidays are already, filled with good emotions, and yet that's not always not always the case for many families out there, regardless of even if they have a sick or dying family member. Now, you did say something earlier about, what they'll do is they'll go through toughing it out. Why don't folks like that, why are they reluctant to ask for help, especially when there's a loved one that's really sick or dying? We know we have those negative feelings, but why do they get so resistant to even asking for help and trying to tough it out by themselves?
Yeah, that's a really good question. They may not be terminally ill or so, but they could just be older. They could be elderly. Could be a parent who can't carry on the old family traditions the way that they used to. So, but often the reason people just won't want to accept their feelings is guilt, that I shouldn't feel that way, that it's not right, that I should just kind of do what I've got to do and, sort of follow the family traditions. But, they may not feel right about it. They may have some resentments that they're trying to bury. So it's often just kind of a sense of guilt about I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't, try to change anything. I've just got to kind of deal with what I've got to deal with. And so, what happens to families, by the way, when they get together for occasions like the holidays, is that I think most people can relate to this. They revert to the old roles they had when they were growing up. So, whatever role they played in the family when they were younger, as soon as they get together or anticipate the holidays, we kind of revert to those old roles. So if your old role when you were growing up was to be kind of, say, a parental parent, you were very responsible and took care of everything. So it's very easy to revert to that old role. But underneath that, there can be some resentment because, you may feel, hey, I'm doing too much. I'm trying to carry the family on my back. And, I feel guilty about saying anything about it or even guilty about feeling that way because the holidays, after all, are supposed to be all fun, right? So there's often guilt that underlies the resistance to or reluctance to accept how you really feel.
So I have a question because you brought up resentment, you brought up guilt. We have a lot of emotional wounds, many of us do. And again, this is on top of if we're dealing also with a sick, an older, a parent who just can't get along or not get along,
right.
but get around,
right.
or dying. So that's on top of everything. But why are old wounds and resentments, why are they so highlighted for families during this particular time of the year? Why not just all year round? Why this particular time it seemed to be under a microscope?
They are largely because this is the time of year, say Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, where families get together. Today in America, families are often, either far-flung or even if they live geographically close, the way we live today, everybody being so busy, if you talk to most people, and you ask them, well, how often do you get together with the whole family? They'll say basically holidays, okay? They may get together occasionally for a child's birthday or something like that, but it's typically it's the holidays. And also the holidays build a lot of expectations. Everybody, look at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade for Thanksgiving. Everybody's supposed to be happy, okay? The idea is that by the time Santa Claus comes at the end of the parade, everybody's supposed to be really happy. The same thing is true for Christmas or Hanukkah, right? Everybody's supposed to be happy. And they get together. That's the key. This is because the way our culture is today, a lot of families only really get together around these holidays. And that's what brings up a lot of stuff that people just would rather not think about, the rest of the year. And that's okay. Maybe they don't want to think about it. But the problem is that the feelings still are there. The feelings, resentments or jealousies, whatever it is that has bothered you, then they tend to crop up. And I said before, the worst thing to do is try to deny it and say, oh, no, I shouldn't feel that way. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay. That's not the best way. And like, for example, dealing with a terminally ill parent, a child who has basically become the parental child, has taken on most of the responsibility for dealing with a terminally ill parent, may do so willingly. But that man or woman may also, have a certain amount of resentment that nobody else is kind of, helping as much as they could.
Yeah, so when you combine all of these really interesting dynamics, right? So you've got families who are spread around the geographical location who might only have time to get together at the holiday time, so it intensifies that. Not only that, we have old wounds, resentments, jealousies. We tend to revert back to, to old roles that we had when we were young. Even
Exactly.
like my husband, who's 50 years old. Sometimes when he gets back home, it's almost like he's a little boy with his parents. I'm like, you are a 50-year-old man. That is no longer your role.
Right.
And we laugh about it, but it is true. It triggers all of those things. And then when you have these expectations of past tradition, and you have all of that, and then you've got a family member that you're dealing with, and because if there's one sibling or one particular person that's used to taking the responsibility, I'm sure that stress and tension builds. And a lot of times I would imagine that family members don't know what to do. Like, are we changing tradition because something's wrong with mom or dad, or now they're in the nursing home, or, it's almost like they shut down, they become paralyzed, they just don't know what to do, so they're almost robotic. They just do what they know to do from the past, I would imagine. But and maybe that came out in your interviews as well. I don't know what paralyzes them.
Yes, it does. Well, it's just the fact that people, tend to want to bury those feelings, and they then become paralyzed. They become trapped by them. I mean, maybe your husband really had a very, comfortable role in the family, but he may have siblings who are jealous, who were jealous of him growing up, but they don't want to express that because it's the holidays and everybody should be happy. So, our advice to people was, don't be so passive. After accepting, the first step is accepting how you might feel. The second step is don't be passive. It may be that your parent who is getting older, very old, and can't carry on the traditions, or maybe ill and can't carry on the traditions. And so instead of just feeling kind of depressed or stuck in your old role, as you say, families get together on holidays, and it takes only an hour for everybody to get into their old role. Don't be passive. Empower yourself, to make some changes. And that's really the key second step, to accept how you feel, and then don't get stuck in it. Don't just sort of wallow in feeling resentful, that you were the black sheep in the family growing up, or that your sibling, was favored, or that you're carrying too much responsibility for an aging parent. Accept those feelings, and then second, empower yourself. You can make changes, and you should. Maybe you need to create new family traditions. So, you can take the lead in that. Maybe, the holiday is going to take place in somebody else's house. Maybe people are going to have to contribute to, like, what to making the dinner. So empower yourself. Also, empower yourself in terms of changing your role. If you were the black sheep of the family growing up, well, do you still want to play the role of the black sheep? Or are you in a different place now in your life? And how would you change that? How would you find your voice, if you will, and step forward and make a change in the way the role you play in the family? So taking act, not being passive about it is really critical.
Yeah, it's not, just blindly accepting that that's the role and you have no control or power over that. Even though people might still react, respond, and put you in that role, you no longer have to respond in that way. Listeners, we are tuned into the Texas Conflict Coach Blog Talk Radio program, and I invite you to follow us on Blog Talk Radio and through Twitter with @TX Conflict Coach. And I'm speaking with psychologist Dr. Joe Nowinski from Connecticut about really preparing for the holidays. Is it really celebration or is it mayhem? And how do we cope with illness, aging, and unresolved issues? And a couple of things that Joe has already mentioned here is the first is don't deny the negative feelings. It's really quite normal. Everyone has grown up in a family. So unless you were isolated and on Mars Everyone has family. We've all have resentments, jealousies, hurts, guilt. And the thing about you're saying is accept those negative feelings and don't sit in them. Don't sit in the depression. Don't do nothing about it. Empower yourself, you said, to make the change. And one of those significant changes is change the role. So like you said, if you were a black sheep, if you were the, you were the one that was seen as the victim or the, the quiet one or whatever the role was that you had and you no longer want to fulfill that role, it's your job and you're really in control of changing that role. And like you said, how do you do that and how do you find that voice? So what are you going to do about it, basically? You have a voice, and how can you do that? The other is asking for what you need and asking for help, especially if you're the one whose responsibility or the family says, oh, she'll do it. She's always take care of mom. Let's talk to that person. What would you say to that person that's listening and that says that responsibility is on me? I feel overwhelmed by that. What would you say to that person?
Well, I'd say don't just sort of sit in your resentment, because the person who has, in every family when this happens, illness, aging, somebody steps up to the plate. By the way, typically if a family member, say it's a parent or a spouse, gets a diagnosis that's terminal or potentially terminal, initially the whole family sort of, comes together and wants to help. And that's very good. But as time goes on, what we found from all of our interviews is that some of those people, or a lot of those people kind of, fade into the background. And it's usually one or two people who step up to the plate, okay, and take on the great majority of responsibility. And it could be for just, it could be for taking care of an aging or ill parent, or it could be for taking over the family traditions. But what happens to those people is eventually they start to feel burned out. They willingly take out the responsibility, but let's face it, they start to get burned out. They may feel guilty about that. They may feel they got to keep doing it, but they feel burned out. So we said, first of all, accept those feelings. Stop denying those feelings. If you start to feel resentful, accept it. It's okay to feel burned out or resentful, but don't be passive, and don't, the worst thing that people can do when they're dealing with an aging or ill, say, parent or spouse, is that somebody will call, say, let me know if there's anything I can do. Well, that's the worst thing that somebody can say, because we found that most of the time people are reluctant to actually ask for help. And so they end up becoming more and more isolated. So we tell people, get over your shyness, get over your reticence, reach out and ask for help. Say, what would really help is if you brought the dessert for Thanksgiving dinner. Everybody else made some desserts, so I don't have to worry about that. Or let's kind of decide how we're going to celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah. What are we going to do? Where is it going to be? So kind of, don't sit in your resentment, because that's not going to get you anywhere. Take action and, ask for what you need. Again, and if you're in the other position, if, it's someone in your family who gets ill, our advice has been, don't say, if there's anything I can do, let me know, because you'll never hear from them. All right? Mm-hmm. What you need to do is say, let me bring, I think what we're going to do is we're going to bring over dinner every Wednesday night, okay? Or one man who said his brother said, I'm going to come over and mow your lawn every Saturday, okay? Didn't say just, if you need help, ask me, but kind of stepped up to the plate and said, I'm going to do this. On the other side of the coin is if you're in the position where you feel like you're taking on too much responsibility, you don't know, what's the family going to do moving forward. You need to sort of, not just sit there and feel resentful, but step up to the plate and say, this is what I need. Who's willing to do it? Okay. And that's, that may be difficult for some people to do, but I call it kind of finding your voice. Instead of being quiet, find your voice, step up and say, this is what I need. this is what the family needs. How are we going to do it?
And the thing about it is, listeners, we see this a lot in the work that I do in conflict is that, find that voice and step up and speak for that. But what often happens is because we hold our tongue and we're passive, as you say, we wait till we at burned out level and we explode like a volcano, and then it comes out not as, I need your help. Instead it comes out, how come you never help me? How come you never pitch in? Why are you blah, blah, blah? And then it goes back probably to something that happened 20 years ago in the family. And, well, when we were children, you blah, 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 right? They go there. Not very constructive or productive when really what you're saying is, one, don't deny whatever you're feeling. It's okay. It's normal. Say, I'm feeling burnt out. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. And that by just naming it and vocalizing it out loud, whether just to yourself or maybe your spouse or your brother or whomever, just by naming it takes a lot of power out of that. I find that by doing that. And so I like what you're saying, but for those who really have a strong time, vocalizing that, I love the strategy that you just gave, which is what if you are the spouse supporting your spouse who's really struggling? What if you're the friend that's seeing them struggle and you're like, I just hate seeing them struggle. I don't know what to do. Sometimes people will just pray for me. Okay, well, that's great. Prayers have their place, but you're saying be specific. I will bring dinner over on Wednesday. I will come over and mow your lawn on Saturdays. I will come vacuum your carpet and take your dogs for a walk. Be specific, because otherwise they'll, like you said, they'll never hear from. I see that all the time. That's a great strategy.
Yeah,
now,
I think so. And go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask is that one of the things too, in terms of helping and stuff. One of the things that happens, there's two things I wanted to bring out. One that we talked about even in our planning call is this, there's two angles, and you can choose which way you want to go, which is we have these old traditions, as you know, that we grew up with, but now maybe they can't be honored for any number of reasons, right? Geographical, mom can't cook the turkey dinner anymore, whatever those traditions are. So there is a sense, I would imagine, of disappointment and loss. What do we do with those feelings of loss or mourning those traditions?
Well, again, it starts with accepting that I feel bad that, we can't do, the family tradition that we used to do. Maybe it's divorce, maybe it's illness, maybe it's aging. Those are realities. But, again, I guess my point is not to be negative, but that by accepting those feelings is a doorway to change. Okay, so what we often talk about, and some of the interviews we did with, say, terminally ill people, was someone who stepped up to the plate and said, "Well, we're going to create a new family tradition. It's sad that we can't follow the old one. Maybe dad is dead and mom is aging, and we can't have the Thanksgiving dinner in the way we used to have." But instead of just feeling bad about that, accept that and then say, well, let's create a new tradition. Let's create a new family tradition. And that can be very important, really, really critical, because families are so far-flung today. People may feel, when I was young, the whole family got together for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and this is what we did. But now people live 1,000 miles apart. So what we found that people advise us, this is what actually the interviewees advised us, is tell people to create their own new traditions. So that's really critical. And, that's the way to get past the bad feelings. First, you acknowledge the bad feelings, and then you kind of empower yourself and find your voice, and you change your role in the family, or you change, or you create a new tradition. That actually leads to a lot of, good feelings, and the holidays can become a good time again. But they won't become a good time again if you just sort of get stuck in the resentments or get stuck in the mourning for the way things used to be.
it's like getting stuck in quicksand, and you're at the halfway point. You're like, okay,
right, exactly.
I don't know how to get out. Somebody to throw me a rope, or I learn how to, maneuver out of that, and that can be, very burdensome and stuff. Now, one thing we want to know, as a psychologist, you have a huge practice and you do a lot of research and writing. Listeners who normally, just during the regular year, experience anxiety and depression, I would expect that with the holiday time and the additional stresses that could actually make that worse. That's normal that would happen, right?
Right, exactly. And anxiety and depression are real, and they're probably the number one mental diagnoses today. And medication, for example, can help that. Medication can help anxiety. It can help depression. But research clearly shows that medication alone is not nearly as effective as medication plus change. Okay? And, it may be a little challenging. It may be a little difficult. But sometimes people need the help of a coach or a therapist to make those changes. We talked about, tonight, say finding your voice. Saying I need help. That can be the way out from, along with say medication. That can be the way out from depression. Same thing with anxiety. People who are say burdened with taking care of a terminally ill or aging parent can feel a tremendous amount of anxiety. They worry every day. They're taking their medication, to doctor's appointments. How are they doing? So basically kind of accepting those feelings, the anxiety, but then not just sitting with it, not just feeling, well, I can't reach out, but finding your voice and saying, I need help, for example. And that could be family members. It could be even community. It could be from a local church or synagogue. It could be reaching out to saying, I need some help. And that actually can make the holidays much more enjoyable.
Absolutely. When you can really do that. I did have one interesting comment in the chat box, and it really kind of go to the old guilt and old roles and things. And one of the individuals wrote, what if you go home and you put the person in the chat room said the comment they received was too bad you put. I'm imagining a family member said this to them. Too bad you put in the effort to lose weight when you were heavy. You at least looked younger. So there's these jabs that family members will do, and it probably goes back to those old roles. When someone hears that and they're already dealing with the stress and they're having the added responsibility or when they're hearing these jabs, how would you suggest they respond to something so that they don't get baited or react to that?
Well, first of all, those kind of things happen. Like, you never wore that you never wore that good in school. You always look better when you were thinner. First of all, don't just absorb that and sit with it. Okay, accept it. That really makes me feel bad. That brings up a lot of jealousy. That makes me feel my body image wasn't good when I was young, and this kind of brings it back. Usually, by the way, when that happens in families, the root of it is a lot of kind of jealousy or sibling competition. And so somebody's saying that in order to sort of put you back to where you were when you were growing up. So our advice is don't go there. You're different now. You just resist falling back into that old role. So you might say something like, I feel pretty good about how I feel, how I'm doing right now with my weight. I feel pretty comfortable about my body. Thank you very much. Or actually, I feel, I'm okay with, where my career is right now. So, accepting that it may hurt, but again, finding your voice. Don't just sit there. And sure, it may ruffle some feathers, Speaking up may make somebody else uncomfortable, but guaranteed it's going to make you feel more comfortable. And it's going to change your role in the family from someone who just sort of maybe accepts criticism and feels depressed to someone who finds your voice and stands up for yourself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and it makes sense, too, that that person who makes those comments, maybe that was their role to criticize, and so they want to continue that role. And the thing that you're saying, Joe, is you listeners do not have to continue to play the old role. And I'm glad that you said accept it, because it's not accepting. You're not saying accept the comment and just sit there and be beaten up on. You're saying accept the fact that it made you feel hurt.
Right.
But that you don't have to sit with it, and you don't have to attack back, and you don't have to be mean and nasty. You can say, that really hurt. And, I worked really hard, and I feel really good about who I am. And that's the voice you're saying. So there's a delicate balance between taking the bait and playing the old role and getting defensive or attacking or however your strategy was, to being like, you know what, I'm confident. I feel courageous, and I feel good about who I am today or where I am today. And, boy, will that surprise the other person.
Exactly, and it could be someone, say, who had a substance abuse problem when they were younger, and now they're in recovery. And so somebody brings up the fact, says something nasty about, well, you were really a problem when you were young. And instead of just feeling depressed, accept the fact that hurts, as you said, it does hurt. But then saying, yeah, but I'm feeling pretty good about where I am right now. That's changing your role in the family. It's changing the family dynamics. Now, of course, that could, ruffle the feathers, so to speak. But guaranteed, it could move the family in a positive direction. It actually could, change your role in the family, could actually force other people to shift their roles to some extent.
And the statement that you just provided, like, I feel pretty good where I'm at, one sentence, keeps it simple, doesn't, drag into a huge fight. Just, I feel really good about where I'm at. Period.
Doesn't exist.
And that's a safe place to be. So, gosh, we could talk forever, and I know we're over time. And listeners, y'all been so patient. Thank you for being with us in the chat room. We always, listeners are so used to us giving them assignments for the week or a call to action, something to allow them to take the next step. What do you have for them?
Well, I'd say that taking from our discussion tonight, first of all, plan now, as you said at the beginning. Don't wait until if you're Christian, don't wait till December 23rd to think about what you're going to do. Okay, start thinking about it now. Think about what feelings, aside from the positive feelings you might have anticipating, say, the holidays, try to get a handle on what negative feelings you have. Is it resentment? Is it jealousy? Or whatever? And then the second step is to not be passive, but to think about one little thing, even one little thing you can do to change your role in the family, for example. And I guarantee you that what we found out from our interviews is that even one little thing can make you feel much better about yourself, can make, the holidays more enjoyable for you, and actually can maybe precipitate a little bit of change in the family as a whole.
Very powerful. Thank you very much. And folks, we'll put this on the program page as well as a summary. What's the best way for them to find out more information about you, Joe?
Well, they can go to my website, which is very catchy, josephnowinski.com.
Well, that's a catchy name.
That's right, josephnowinski.com. And they'll find my contact information there if they want to get in touch with me. And they'll also see, my books are listed there. Or they can go to Amazon.com and they can just, type in Joseph Nowinski and they'll find my books there too.
Yeah, because you have a number of them, and Saying Goodbye is the one that you were talking about today.
Right.
I want to thank our listeners for joining us, for being on our Twitter feed, for being in our chat room today, and for leaving comments. Joe, thank you so much for being part of our listening audience and educating them with your expertise and experience. What final message would you like to leave with our listeners tonight?
Well, take charge of the holidays. Find your voice, take charge of the holidays, and enjoy them. Accept the fact that there may be some negative in with the positive, but accept the negative and then take some action.
Wonderful. Thank you. Those are really great actual steps. Thank you so much, and have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you enjoyed the program. You can find all of our podcasts archived to listen at your convenience at texasconflictcoach.com or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. You can also become a Facebook fan of Conflict Connection or Twitter me at TX Conflict Coach.